listening to LSU Daily with Matt Musso, your home for all things LSU sports.
Off and running here on another edition of LSU Daily. Welcome in. Well, it is finally here. LSU, Ole Miss, a week that many have had circled way back into the offseason when the SEC schedule was finalized October 12th. Not only for LSU, but just college football in general. Feels like they've had this week circled, and it is here. And one of the marquee matchups is your Fighting Tigers of LSU versus the Ole Miss Rebels. Brian Kelly will meet with the media to kick off the week later on today. But there is significant news coming out surrounding this game, and it deals with the other side. A very key injury to keep an eye on throughout the week is to Ole Miss's Tre Harris, wide receiver. We will touch on that, give you a little bit of insight on what happened and what might be to come for the Rebels as they prepare to make their trip to Baton Rouge. And then, look, I would be remiss if on this day we did not talk about the absolutely chaotic weekend that was in college football. And it didn't teach a very valuable lesson, but it reinforced a lesson that sometimes we lose sight of. And you just need to be reminded, and that is any given week in this sport. It doesn't matter what the slate looks like. Any given week, it could be your week where the old college football god comes a-knocking and upends everything that you have going on for you. And that was week 6 in college football for a lot of teams, and including a couple others that survived the scare as well. So do want to dive into that a little bit as well, because, I mean, it was just a lot of fun to watch. I mean, great college football theater over the weekend in week 6. And while we have a little bit of time today, before we get too deep into the weeds of LSU Ole Miss week, did want to touch on a little bit of that. So be sure to like, share, subscribe. Please subscribe. Follow me on social media at Musso Matthew. That's Twitter X. And, of course, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram as well. All of that is greatly appreciated. All right, let's dive in, and we will start LSU Ole Miss. So LSU, of course, as we all know, coming off of their first bye, they used it as a work week. Not much of rest and recovery. Worked throughout the week. Team had Saturday and Sunday off, and they'll obviously get back at it today. Ole Miss, on the other hand, was on the road at South Carolina, and it was a game that many thought would be a tricky spot, or I should say, could be a tricky spot, where if you're the Rebels, you're coming off of your first loss of the season, where you were upset and really humbled, quite honestly, by Kentucky. That was not a fluke. Kentucky dominated control of possession of that football game. They made huge plays. Mark Stoops made, the aggressive decisions late in the game to put his team in a position to win. You got beat, and you got knocked down a peg, and you got humbled. And now you look down the schedule, if you're Ole Miss after that, and you see a trip to South Carolina and then a trip to Death Valley staring you in the face. All the meanwhile, while LSU has the bye week that we just talked about. And you can look at that and go, you better come correct, because that South Carolina team is physical, and you're coming off a physical game, and they can really take it to you. You'll have Lenore Sellers back for the Gamecocks, Rocket Sanders back. Like, there was reason to believe, okay, Ole Miss, be alert again. And it just wasn't the case. The Rebels go out there. They dominate from jump, 27-3, your final score. They keep their one-loss record intact, and they set up this monster showdown with LSU in Death Valley on Saturday night. It's going to be huge. Like, this game was always going to be big, y'all. It was always going to be big. It got bigger with that Ole Miss loss to Kentucky. Because when LSU lost to USC, the circle you already had around this game, you went and grabbed the Sharpie and you boldened that circle around this game, because you knew, okay, you should be able to get through your next 4, have your bye, and then this is where you're really going to learn about LSU again. And there's going to be a lot on the line for the rest of your season. Well, the same thing happened for Ole Miss when they lost that game to Kentucky. They went back, they grabbed their Sharpie, and they boldened the circle that they had around this game. Because now both teams come in with no margin for error. Both of these teams mathematically still alive for everything. You lose, and you look at what's left on the schedule for these teams, and it's going to be huge. Now, in that 27-3 win for Ole Miss over South Carolina, there could have been some pretty big consequence. It could have come at a pretty big price. So, early in the game, second quarter, Tre Harris, wide receiver extraordinaire for the Rebels, goes down with an ankle injury and had to exit the game. He would not return. Lane Kiffin, after the game, told reporters that Harris was not close to going back in. Like, that was not even really a consideration. They had talked to him at halftime, so they knew second half they were going to be without Tre Harris. He also mentioned that after the game, he didn't have a whole lot more. He'd get that report a little bit later on Saturday night. Lane Kiffin will also meet with the media on Monday, and we'll get a better answer from him on what's next for Tre Harris. Again, it's thought to be an ankle injury. Happened in the second quarter. He left and did not return. So you might ask, why is that so significant? Well, because Tre Harris is not just the best wide receiver on Ole Miss's team. Tre Harris is not just the best wide receiver in the SEC. Statistically, Tre Harris is the best wide receiver in the country. He is the nation's leading receiver, 885 yards through 6 weeks, and not even 6 full weeks for him. And he leads by more than 100 yards. He has been absolutely awesome. The guy didn't even play a full half against South Carolina, still ended that game with 3 receptions and 81 yards. He is an absolute game breaker. He is that complete wide receiver that can stretch the field, that can hit the intermediate routes. He is an elite player and has been Ole Miss's best offensive player to this point in the season. And again, as I said, one of the best in the entire nation. And oh, by the way, yes, that name should sound very familiar to you because he absolutely torched you last season in Oxford. In that game, the 55-49 game, Tre Harris went for 8 receptions for 153 yards and 1 touchdown. He averaged 19 yards per reception in that game with a long of 56. He was awesome. Louisiana native, by the way, too. So when I look at this, it's not hard now to understand why that is so significant. But dig a little deeper. Y'all, the Ole Miss offense the last 2 weeks hasn't been nearly what many people thought it would through the first 4 whenever they were playing the weaker competition. And look, I'm not, don't misconstrue, don't misunderstand, don't twist what I'm saying here. I'm not telling you that Ole Miss's offense is bad. They aren't. They have Lane Kiffin. He's the best play caller in college football. Their offense is never going to be bad. Their offense is capable every week because of that man of going out there and putting up 40 or 50 on anybody they play. But the last 2 weeks, when they've taken a step up in competition, it's been a noticeable difference for the Ole Miss offense. 27 points against South Carolina. That's after 17 points against Kentucky. Before that, their low water mark on the season was 40 against Wake Forest. So you've seen a team that wasn't held below 40 in the pre-conference be held below 30 twice in the non-conference, and now they might be without their best weapon. That is the most significant storyline heading into this football game as it stands, as we kick off game week. Again, we will wait for Lane Kiffin to give the official update. He probably won't say much because Lane never says much. And when he doesn't say much, then we'll start digging a little bit more deeper. But that is something to watch all week, and that is it's going to be the status of Tre Harris is going to be a major question all week because that is the best offensive weapon that they have, and they might be without him for arguably their biggest, not even arguably, for their biggest game to this point in the season. Same goes for LSU. It's going to be fantastic. Like, I cannot wait for that atmosphere, for for that game where you ultimately have two teams kind of in a de facto playoff game, if you will, battling it out. It should be an epic, epic clash. All right, so as I said, that's going to obviously be the focal point for the majority of this week, and for good reason. But while we had a little bit of time here, I did want to really dive into just a wacky college football weekend in week number 6. A week where everyone really looked at the slate. Everyone really looked at the slate and said, ugh. You have one ranked-on-ranked matchup, and it's at 11 a.m., A&M in Missouri. That's the only ranked matchup of the week is going to be over by 2:30. Gross. A lot of people said that. Hell, I did it. Like, I'm in that number too. And then we were all reminded just throughout the day, actually starting with that A&M Missouri matchup, that you just never know in college football. And you can never take any week for granted in college football. In that ho-hum week 6 that everybody thumbed their nose at, by now you know, 4 teams in the top 10 lost. 5 teams in the top 11 lost. Number 1 went down. More on that momentarily. Number 4 went down. Number 9 got absolutely shellacked. Number 10 went down. Number 11 lost. And oh, by the way, number 8 needed an absolutely insane comeback that I missed because I went to bed, probably like all of you, when it was 35-10 Cal. Number 8 needed an insane comeback 2 weeks in a row now to keep their perfect season alive, talking about the Miami Hurricanes. It was absolute chaos from start to finish on Saturday, and damn it, it was beautiful. Oh, it was everything, every reason we all love and just long for the sport and the season of college football was this past Saturday. When everyone's eyes are on week 7, week 6 delivers. That is why you love college football. That is why we love college football. Yes, it started in College Station, but that's not where we're going to start. We're going to start in Nashville, because what you saw in Nashville, first of all, was just so enjoyable. But second of all, is one of the biggest upsets in college football history. And that is not hyperbole at all. Like, at all. That is one of the biggest upsets in the history of college football. You can just look at the 2 brands that were being represented in the game. That's one reason. Vanderbilt's never supposed to beat Alabama, ever. Vanderbilt scored 13 points against Alabama in the entire tenure of Nick Saban. Every time they played Nick Saban, they scored a total of all those games of 13 points. Vanderbilt had 13 points in the first quarter against Alabama on Saturday. They had 23 in the first half against Alabama on Saturday. Ultimately, they scored 40 in that ball game. And they scored 13 against Nick Saban in his entire tenure at Alabama. Number 1 ranked teams. And a hat tip to my colleagues at LouisianaSports.net here. Number 1 ranked teams. 364-2 versus unranked teams when scoring 35 or more points. Bama did that. But they gave up 40. So now number 1 teams are 364-3 when doing that. Alabama never led in that football game. Vanderbilt was in firm control. Diego Pavia, awesome in that football game, man. Awesome. 252, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, added 56 yards on the ground, and didn't put the ball on the ground there either. We've talked over and over and over again throughout history. How do you upset Alabama? You need that great game from your quarterback, and Vandy got it. They got 300 yards from their quarterback, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions. They ran the ball for 166 yards, outrushed Alabama 166-84. Vanderbilt held Alabama to 84 yards rushing. And it's not like Vandy ever had this giant lead. Their biggest lead was 10. Like, Alabama could have absolutely kept running the football and things like that. They didn't go away from it. Vanderbilt just stopped it. Vanderbilt was the better team that day. And it was really sweet. Because what it did is it welcomed Alabama back to college football reality. It's something we all knew would happen this season at some point after Nick Saban had retired. And I'm not trying to take, ultimate shots at Alabama. That's not what I'm doing here. Did I enjoy the hell out of that? Absolutely. It was beautiful. But welcome back. You just got reminded that nothing will bring you back down to earth faster than college football. That is college football reality, and you are once again part of it. Welcome back. Join us. You are one of us again. And that's how it should be. With that loss on Saturday, there is no just perennial juggernaut power in college football right now. There's the top of the top elite teams, but there is no more dynasty in college football right now. It's not Georgia. It's not Alabama. It's not Texas. It's not Michigan. It's not even Ohio State, Clemson, LSU. It's nobody. Vanderbilt's win over Alabama officially did that in. And I know there's probably some Georgia people who are, what are you talking about? It's Georgia. No, it's not. You missed the playoffs last year, and then you lost last week to Alabama, who just lost to Vanderbilt. The playing field feels more even right now than it ever has in college football. That win by Vanderbilt signified so much of that. And damn it, if you just aren't happy for that program and Clark Lee, because Vanderbilt's never going to amount to this, power or threat consistently in the SEC. That's why it's so easy to be happy for them. It's so easy to just love watching the students carry the goalpost down Broadway. It was easy to root and just rejoice in Vanderbilt on Saturday. So an awesome win for them, an awesome win for Clark Lee in that program. Diego Pavia absolutely owns the state of Alabama. He beat Auburn last season when he was at New Mexico, and he beat Alabama this year when he was at Vanderbilt. And I'll tell you this too, as I just said that Vanderbilt will never amount to this consistent power or contender in the SEC, Vanderbilt should be 5-0 this year. They should have beat Georgia State. They couldn't get one stop at the end, and their kicker missed like a 33-yarder or whatever in overtime that would have beaten Missouri. They could very well be 5-0, but they're not, and that's why they're Vanderbilt, and that's why they never will ever amount into anything. But that's a sneaky good team, and that's going to be a really fun game as well when they come into Tiger Stadium a little bit later on. Tennessee goes down at Arkansas. First top 5 win at home for Arkansas since they beat Tennessee in I think it was 30 plus years ago. And you saw Taylor Green go down in the game. So they do it with a backup quarterback in Malachi Singleton. Tennessee had plenty of opportunity in this football game and couldn't get it done. You saw a regression from Nico Iamaleava. I don't know how, if he's at 100% for that game or not. Dylan Sampson did his damnedest on the ground, but in the end, embraced the hog. Arkansas getting the win there. They got a huge performance from Andrew Armstrong, their top receiver, and they were able to do just enough. They were able to do just enough just enough offensively and lean on their defense and score that major upset. And now Tennessee is left recalibrating. Tennessee looked like a national championship contender the last few weeks, and they get knocked down a peg. Missouri, where the day started, got absolutely shellacked. That one was never close. Texas A&M was up 24-0 at halftime and never looked back. Connor Wegman made his return and played really well. 18-22 for 276. Arguably one of the best games in his career. Might be the best game in his career, but you got a heavy effort on the ground as well from Le'Veon Moss, and Missouri is fraudulent. That's the fact of the matter right there. Brady Cook has been nowhere near the quarterback he was last year. Your rushing attack is nowhere to be found now that Cody Schrader is off to the NFL as well. You're not even getting enough from Brady Cook in that aspect. Missouri ran for 68 yards. Now, again, they're down 24-0. They can't really run the ball that much there, but that's just been weekly. Everyone looked at Missouri and thought they were a contender because of their schedule. The problem is when you regress your schedule doesn't much matter. And that's what you're seeing from Missouri. And they have many more losses coming their way even after that schedule. And all it really takes is one more for Mizzou. If Mizzou is a 10-2 team with that schedule and what might play out the rest of the time in the SEC, they're going to need some help. Like, they would need help with their schedule, even at 10-2, to get in at this point, I do believe. Because what you saw in this weekend, the SEC is incredibly strong. 3 of the 4 top 10 teams that lost, they were in the SEC. Vandy and Arkansas upset top 10 teams. This league is so damn incredibly deep this year. It is so incredibly deep this year in the Southeastern Conference. Just insane. Washington defeats Michigan. Unranked team favorite of a ranked team. You might want to keep throwing money on that. It hits a lot. 27-17. That's got to be fun because, yes, Michigan is down, but that's the national championship rematch, and Washington's able to get the revenge. And in an offseason where they saw their head coach leave, that also has to, be great. And the Washington program's not going anywhere. Like, Jed Fish is going to do a great job there because Jed Fish is a really good coach. You lost Kalen DeBoer, who's a really good coach, but you replaced him with a really good coach. That showed stability in the Washington program, and so does this win. Even though, yes, I get it, Michigan is down. Fully understand. Washington was the favorite in this game, so technically not an upset. Totally understand. But that's a huge win for them going forward. So, and it was part of the chaos. And it was a great finish in that ball game as well. That's a tied game. Michigan has the lead. Michigan had the lead going into the fourth quarter in that game. And you saw Washington shut them out 13-0 to ultimately win that game by 10 points. Honeymoon phase is over in Los Angeles. USC scored the win over LSU in the opener, got themselves up into the top 10. Everybody thought they were going to be something. They get themselves out to the 2-0 start. They go lose on the road to Michigan. We're down early to Wisconsin, came back. Then they have to go on the road to Minnesota, and they dropped that one 24-17 to a bad Minnesota team. PJ Fleck's football team is not good. That is an ugly loss. That is now a 3-3 team in Minnesota, and USC's down to 3-2, and their season is also pretty much over. They're going to have to do some impressive things in the Big Ten. 10-2 SC not getting in. And then there's Miami. And y'all, Miami is living proof right now that sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. You go back to that game 2 weeks ago against Virginia Tech, and Miami got lucky. Miami should have lost that football game. And not because that was a touchdown, but because it was called a touchdown on the field, inexplicably. And then you had no angle, no clear evidence to actually overturn that. But it was, and Miami escaped there. Then they make the cross-country trip to Cal this past weekend and fall down 35-10, and I went to bed because that game was over. It was over. And then I woke up the next morning, checked the score, and said, what the hell happened? Miami outscores Cal 21-3 to stave off the upset in the fourth quarter and win it 39-38. Just an absolutely insane game out there in Berkeley. So while sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, that was 2 weeks ago against Virginia Tech. You come back from 35-10, you did some really good things there. Cam Ward was awesome. Goes for 437 and the 2 tuds. Did have the 1 interception, but that was early in the game, and it was hideous, by the way. Goodness gracious, it was ugly. Throws back across his body, just off his back foot, back across his body, a wounded duck just into the middle of the field, and it gets picked off. But he was awesome in the second half after that. It was a complete offensive performance there, and they shut down Cal. They shut down Cal in that really in that second half, and specifically the fourth quarter. So hat tip there. I mean, that's gutsy. That's a really gutsy win for Miami. They continue to look like the best team in the ACC, but man, they are surviving scares, and eventually they're going to get knocked down a peg. It's just going to happen because you cannot keep living on the edge that way and not eventually slip and fall. So ultimately, be on the lookout for Miami, and that's back-to-back weeks now for the Canes that they have just had to grind it out. Lucky for them, they have their bye this week After that, they have to go on the road to Louisville. So we'll see what kind of corrections they make, and I'll be very interested actually to see Miami when they go up there to face the Cardinals, how they look. If they've gotten their bearings back about them, and they can just go dominate. Louisville has fallen on hard times. Miami's schedule, man, it ain't intimidating. That's for sure. It's another reason everybody liked them so much this year. But you've definitely seen some chinks and flaws in the armor the last 2 weeks. Winning just masks those chinks and flaws in the armor. Eventually, they're going to get exposed totally, and that could be the regular season. It could be in the ACC Championship game. It could be in the playoff. I don't know. But Miami's a flawed team. Right now, they're a flawed 6-0 team. And that was an incredible comeback for them on Saturday night. So just a wild week. And y'all, that was the appetizer. Or at least it was supposed to be. This is the week everybody's had circled. I'm fired up to watch it. Know you are as well. We'll continue to count you down the rest of the week here on LSU Daily. So y'all get subscribed, like, share. Again, get subscribed. Follow me on social media. All of that greatly appreciated. And be here next time for more on LSU Daily.